Scaleup leader. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about a process that I've learned that I picked up at Amazon, and I call this process the Stalemate Buster. And so, in that situation where you have two teams or two groups or two people who are at a stalemate and they can't resolve this, and usually this happens because the question they need to resolve is more about alignment. It's about I'm trying to do this and you're trying to do that, and these two things clash. And this is what our management wants us to be doing. We're doing the right things here. We're doing things in good faith. It's not merely about problem solving usually. Sometimes it is. Usually this is more about resource contention, or sometimes it's about direction and strategy and vision and things we want to do. But often enough, this happens because two teams have goals that conflict, and the conflict might well be that both of these goals depend on that team to do something, or we want to do something with this particular screen or this particular feature, and you want to do something different with the same feature in order to achieve your goals, and we need to resolve these things. Now, often enough, you can have a conversation and resolve these things through conversation, and that's great. If you can do that, do that. There's nothing that you shouldn't try to add a process where you don't need one. But the thing is that often enough, you actually have a problem that you cannot resolve. And the natural response to this is actually the right response. It's to escalate to management. But when you do so, frequently enough, you're just escalating and having a conversation, and then management has to go through all the detail and understand what's happening and then align and so on. So this process is here to make that process easier. This what I call Stalemate Buster. It's to make that process easier, make it more successful. Now, just so you know, I am pre-recording this because I've got a commitment on the day this goes live and I can't be there. But if you have questions or comments or anything like that, drop them in the comments on LinkedIn or YouTube. I will be reading them later on, and I will be responding to them, and I will bring them back into future episodes. I can actually bring up that comment and address that in a Q&A session later on, or whatever, but certainly I will be responding to you, so please do ask those questions. I love hearing your questions because it's the questions and the things that are not clear that help me improve my craft and get better at what I'm doing. So please do ask those questions. Now, with the Stalemate Buster, what I'm going to talk about here is there's a situation, this hypothetical situation, which is that you must be familiar with this because it happens all the time. We want to do something, you want to do something else, we can't resolve it. As I say, you can have a conversation, but the way to make this conversation more effective, and indeed the way to escalate this more effectively, is to use a document. And I use a document that I call a Stalemate Buster. And it's basically a 4-step document. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on screen. If you're listening to this on a podcast, I'll be reading the things that I have on screen, at least in some detail, but you can also access the document. I will share the document on a link somehow. I'm not sure how, probably on the a view link in the description of the podcast. I will put that in there. And note to the editor, let's make sure we do that. And we'll put that in there. We'll also put that link in the LinkedIn and other things as well. So you'll be able to see this and use it as a guide. It's not an amazingly complex template. It's quite simple. So I'm going to share this now. This is the Stalemate Buster. And basically it's a small document, and you want to try and make this as short as you can. If you can do, oops, it's jiggling around. If you can do this as short as you can, it's best. If you can have like 2 pages, 1 page even, wonderful. In this case here, the example that I've done, I've got a little example down the bottom here. This is an actual pre-worked example that I've done. But the basic idea here is you have 4 steps. Number 1, write down the problem. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And you don't need to write this in a really clear way, because if you can express the problem, you're expressing basically the question you need to answer. And Stalemate is always about, we need to solve this particular problem. We need to decide, do we do A or B? We have contention on this resource. We are struggling to decide how to balance between this goal and that goal, or this roadmap and that roadmap, or whether the vision should be this or that. Right? So write the problem down and then add any pertinent background or contextual information. Now, this is quite hard. You do need to do this carefully because you can very, very easily go down the path of like writing a massive essay. And this takes some level of what we say, some level of judgment, I guess, and certainly some experience to be able to do this really well. But it's not that hard in the end, right? The thing to do is to put the minimum information in and ask yourself, do I really need this? What you don't need is a full description of your team and your roadmap and the details of the problem and what everybody said and all that sort of stuff. You just need the basics. So just in the background, I'm just trying to pull up some notes. There we go. Let's just check that this is still working here. My screen is working good. Okay, so you're writing that down, including the background, and we will go into that in a little more detail as well. Write your recommended solution. Now, this is really interesting because this is something that people often resist. I want you to write your recommended solution, and the person who's writing this down is usually the person who has most interest in the problem. Like they're one of the two people. Sometimes there's three people, but they're three people are most interested in it. One person needs to take initiative. The others need to accept that that person's got the document and not write duplicate documents, because they will have the chance to express their opinion in this document. And that's going to be a critical part of this process. So just because you're writing the document doesn't mean that your opinion rules the day. You're simply making a recommendation to say, here's how I'm going to think about this. Now, what you're going to do with the recommendation is specify your recommendation and your thought processes, right? So the reasons, like, why am I thinking this? What's the recommended solution? Now, you can, if you want, put this at the bottom, by the way. Actually, let me go through the 4 sections first, and then I'll go into them in more detail. That might be more efficient. So you write the recommended solutions and your thought process, your reasons, the principles you've applied. Then you list out all of the options that you've considered, like all of the things that you considered. And then for each option, you go through each option in a bit of detail with the pros and cons and any resource requirements, and specifically the conditions where you believe these may be preferred. And so often enough, there's a condition which will be something different. You might be saying, if we believe that the market is going up dramatically, then we should actually do B. But I believe that the market is going to go down, and so we should do option A, right? And that's the kind of thing. The reason you're doing this is to make explicit the thought process and help managers and help yourselves to make a decision clearly. Okay, so you're writing those things down now. I'll go through them in a little more detail. As I said, there's a key skill in distilling the background and context information. You need to have less than half a page if you can. If you haven't got less than half a page, if it's like a page or 2 pages or 6 pages, as can happen, then it means you haven't done enough work to distill to the key points. And it's really hard to make a decision if you haven't distilled this. So distill it down. Sometimes this happens when you have a lot of misalignment between the different teams, because you're going to write this document and then you're going to review it first of all with your colleagues and team members and people who have different opinions to make sure that they're aligned and they agree with it generally. They won't agree with the recommendation necessarily. If they do, it's good, but they might not agree with the recommendation, but they should agree with the fact that you've written these reasons, the fact that this is the background information, that these are the pros and cons of each option, and the conditions where their options may be preferable, right? So you're writing this down, and sometimes you have a lot of background information because you're deeply misaligned. And if that's the case, that's just how it is. And sometimes it's because you haven't done the work to distill. Sometimes it's because you're not very good at distilling, and sometimes it's because people have so much misalignment. If that's the case, just put it there and see how it goes. But that will be a key thing to indicate whether your level of maturity about how you can resolve these decisions. The recommended solution, as I say, it's really about making your thought process transparent, and that's critical because it exercises your decision-making muscle, makes you have to say why you believe something. Why is this my recommendation? As I said, this recommendation is the recommendation of the person who's writing the document, right? So you just do the highlights here. This is really so an executive or a senior person can read this and understand, first of all, what the recommendation is of that person. It provides, it's easier to come to a more rapid conclusion if somebody has put out an opinion. They might be wrong. You might write this down and you might end up being overruled. You might discover you're wrong. You might still believe you're right and still the decision goes a different way. That's okay, because what's happening here is number one, you're getting to a conclusion quicker. You're putting a stake in the ground, and let's go to a conclusion quicker, whatever it is. At least we've got somewhere. And once someone's done that, then someone else can put a different stake if they want. And the second thing is, this is really important, that when you write down your decision-making process and what your decision is, what your recommendation is, then that enables more directed coaching. So managers who are reading this and senior people who are reading this can then coach you on how we make decisions, on how we want to make decisions. And some of that's about making sure you have the right context. So that's why you write the context. This is my context. Often enough, if you're involved in this situation, you have a lot of context that management doesn't have, but they will also have context you do not have. And so this is about two-way communication. You're communicating the context that you believe is really important upwards. And the fact that you're communicating it means that they can then see what context you're using, and then they can just help educate you on the context that you might be missing. But also your decision-making process, the principles you're using. If we're focusing on customer value, or if we're focusing on efficiency, or whatever we're focusing on, that's what you're saying. And they say, actually, our strategies, we want to do something different here. Here's how I make decisions. It makes it easier for them to coach you. And at the act of coaching, one of the purposes of this document is to coach people through the process and help them understand how to make decisions better, to increase trust and increase decision-making velocity and delegate more decisions. So if you write this document, you are more likely to have decisions delegated to you. Writing your recommendation is super important. And you put it at the top, as I say, you put it at the top because you're presenting your opinion for the purpose of being coached. So the fact that you've written this document means that you're going to get coached, right? It makes it efficient for other people to review it, and it makes it faster to get to a conclusion. And likely, if you're one of the people who's closest to the decision, you actually have some pretty good insights, right? I mean, your opinion actually matters, even if you're not the right person to make the right final decision, even if you're missing context, your opinion really does matter. So do write that down. Sometimes you can, by the way, put that recommendation at the bottom. Now, especially if you're going through early in this process, you might want to put it in the bottom because your colleagues might be more receptive to it at the bottom than at the top. But as you go to a senior management, you want to put it closer to the top. So I recommend putting it second. Now, what you're doing is you're then you've got this the options is a list, and you've got the pros and cons of each option, including the recommended one. You're sort of putting the background information here. So in number 2, in this recommended solution, you're not putting all of the information. Just like, here's my recommendation, here's the reasons and the principles I'm applying. Then here's all the options we considered. Here's the pros and cons of each option. That's where you put like the arguments really in place. And you include the resource requirements and specifically conditions where these may be preferred, right? And so that's what I'm talking about, where you say, if we think that the downturn is going to last more than a year, then we should do this. And if we think that the economy is going to pick up quicker, we should do that. If we have cash flow problems, we should do this. If we're more worried about employee turnover, we should do that, right? And that's the kind of thing where this will help surface the differences and the reasons why people support different answers. Like, normally when you have a different guide here, it's partially about the prioritization, like the OKRs or the goals that are set, the vision that people are trying to work towards in their different groups. But it's also partially about their assumptions about the landscape of the world. Like, I'm worried that the economy is going to go down, therefore I want to do something that's going to save us money. I'm worried that we're not going to capture enough market share, therefore I want to do this, right? So that's that assumption about why we wish to do this. It really helps clarify things. It helps coach people. It helps make decisions and all that sort of stuff. And the funny thing is here, you then take this document to the various people involved. So supposing you have just 2 teams having this debate, it's you and another manager, and you have different opinions about how some particular resource should be allocated, or what you should do with a particular page on the site. You have a discussion with this, and they should generally align with everything here. Do they have is all the pertinent background information they believe is important there? Is there stuff that they think should be neglected? And some of these things you have to just have a compromise and say, okay, well, you think it shouldn't be there, I think it should be there, so we'll put it in there, or vice versa. But especially on that section 4, that pros and cons of each option, like what is the argument for each option? That person who supports one particular option needs to believe in what's written there, and they need to be comfortable with it. Now, this is different to often when we get into a debate. Our natural form of debating is to critique the other option. And so the way we naturally do this, and no one wants to admit to doing this, but it does happen, we often come up with a straw man. We sort of pull together a caricature of the other option that we don't want to support, and we represent that, or we misrepresent it in a way that makes people more likely to support our preferred option, right? And this is just a natural human thing. The reason we're doing it this way and getting that person's buy-in and saying, does this accurately represent your reasons, your belief about pros and cons, and your reasons, your conditions where you think this is preferred? Is it, of course, a bit of honesty from both people, but it also means that person is now happy that they're represented, right? Now, as you're going through this, you may come to a point where the people who are involved read this and they go, you know what, I agree on this recommendation, or I change my recommendation, I change it to that. And then you can change that section 2, the recommendation. So you've got problem, recommendation, all the options, and then the discussion of each option. You might change the recommendation as a trip. So you edit the document, change the recommendation, and say this is what it is. Now, if you've done that and you've agreed, great, go ahead. You've now got a solution to the problem. But one thing you should probably do is forward this document, including the recommendation, but actually say as it's a selected solution, right? This the agreed solution to your management, and just say, we had a discussion. This is the basic format of our discussion. And this gives an opportunity for managers to read how you're making decisions and then gain confidence in your decision-making ability and your decision resolution ability, right? Your stalemate busting ability, right? And so that then means that they can increase their confidence. They can also course correct if they think they've got it wrong, whatever. Now, the more commonly you can't resolve this, and often enough it's because it's not necessarily because you're not capable of resolving it, but because the decision must be taken at a higher level. It is fundamentally a prioritization decision or a strategy decision, and I need the management to decide this question, and that's fine. Right, but what you're doing is you're making it easier. So you take this to the next level of management. And so what you would do, ideally, is you get in a room with you and your counterpart in the different things, and both of your managers. Now, if that's the same person, that makes it easier. But if it's two different people, fine, get them in the room with this document and have them go through this. And they should be able to go through this. And managers, because they have more context and more cross-functional context, usually, hopefully, that's the job, then they can be able to make a decision. And it's really important, if they do, that they communicate their reasoning, right? Their principles they're applying, their thought process, make their thought process super clear. Often enough, they'll have additional information requests, or they'll be able to say this information is not relevant. And that'll be educational for the people doing this, because you can help filter out what things go into this decision. Usually managers are better, the more senior you are, the more your ability you have to filter out irrelevant information. And that's a great learning experience to learn from your own management. And if they can't decide, then the process continues. But at that level, they should go through this and make sure that they are then comfortable with the pros and cons and the background information that's there, so that their management, who may be the CEO at this level, maybe it goes up another couple of levels, but so that their management can make a decision. And eventually you get to a point where the CEO has to make a call. And this is the job of the CEO, is that when there are stalemates, they need to break the stalemate and they need information. And so they may well come back and ask for more information, whatever it is. They may make a call based on gut feeling, whatever it is, but at least they're making a call and they're educating you on how this is. And so this process, you can see, goes up and down, and you're providing context upwards. You're providing, here's how I'm going to make a decision. Here's how I want to make a decision. And coming downwards is here's the information we use, and here's how we make a decision. And as you do that, you're building trust upwards and downwards. You're building trust across ways, and you're aligning your decision-making processes. It's a really powerful tool. You can then use this document to record that the decision was made and informing people upwards as well of what we did. It provides that, as I said, the auditing opportunity, but it also provides a record of just how this conversation went and that we had the conversation. So that when it comes up again, we can just refer back to it. When similar conversations, similar decisions come up again, we can have a look at them. How do we resolve this in the past? And it makes it easier to resolve it in the future. So, as I say, this whole process really helps delegate decision-making processes downwards through the organization, and helps inform people of the required context and decision-making principles, like how are we making decisions? What information are you missing at your level to be able to make this decision? And how do I help you make this decision in the future? And it provides opportunity for senior managers to dive deep where needed. So that helps them really understand the context that their reports, their team members actually have, that they think is important. So now I understand that context, now I can make better decisions. So it's a really useful process. Strongly recommend you use it. As I say, the basic process here is write the document, problem, recommended solution, all the options as a list, pros and cons of each option, including any resource requirements and especially the conditions where they may be preferred. And it's critical to be clear about your thinking, what the thinking is, and then take it to your colleagues that are involved. See if you can align. If you can't align, take it to your management and then see if they can use this to align. But it's that meeting and discussion process that really helps. You can't just forward this around as an email and expect a decision to happen, because people need to have a conversation. And one thing you'll note, by the way, is that in doing this, if you've got this done well, then you'll have a really good conversation. Like, a good document drives a good conversation. Now, as an example, I've actually gone through and created a sample, and you'll be able to get this in the link if you're listening to it on the podcast. On screen here, goodness me, it may be a bit small to read. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger, like this. Is that getting bigger? Yes. There we go. That's getting bigger. Okay. So it's a bit bigger on screen. You can read that. So this is a situation where there exists a contention for a platform team resource. So imagine we have two teams. There's a checkout team and a search team right? And they depend on a platform team for delivery of key features that would deliver the OKRs they're committed to. Now, I'm not going to go into how to run OKRs here, but let's imagine that these teams have committed to delivering particular key results, particular objectives, whether they're theirs or company objectives or whatever they are. But this is the things that they've committed to. The platform team only has capacity to deliver one experienced team's request, like checkout team and search team, what we call experienced teams, and there's a platform team, and they're doing sort of infrastructure work behind the scenes, not necessarily customer visible, but supporting these teams with common APIs and stuff like that. Now, this is just a setup, like it's like an example. If the platform team tries to support both teams will be delayed. Doing them sequentially means one team will miss their commitments. Now, there's actually a bit more to the story that I've neglected to add here that I would put in here. That the platform team also have a critical compliance project they need to deliver this quarter, right? So there's that limit. The background information that we have, checkout team has this key result. This requires them to integrate alternative payment methods into the checkout, starting with PayPal, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. We estimate this will deliver 80 to 90% of the desired increase, resulting in a revenue boost of X or Z, right? The next best feature they can work on, this other feature, is estimated to have limited impact, but it's not been assessed in detail. So this is like making sure that everyone's understanding what the current situation is and why a checkout team thinks this is important. To do this, platform team needs to enable API feature this, estimated at 2 sprints, leaving 4 sprints for checkout team to deliver the actual work. Let's just imagine we have 6 sprints per quarter, or that this is the target, right? Search team has a key result. This current discovery experiments indicate that adding faceted search would deliver this result, while tweaks to the algorithm only given marginal gains, right? Again, they've been in a similar situation here. I'm kind of making it up, but you can imagine there's a reason why we think this is important. Our other options are not as attractive for these reasons, right? Estimated impact on revenue is between X and Y% increase. Additionally, it's a contractual requirement by this date for our top tier partners X, Y, and Z to deliver this faceted search, right? Additionally, faceted search is a contractual requirement, and there's a non-compliance penalty of X euros per week of delay following the beginning of the sales season on this date, right? On date. And they have a feature freeze beginning in week 3 of next quarter, right? So which is sort of like making sure that people understand this is the stakes, right? To do this, platform team needs to enable API feature ABC, estimated at 3 sprints of effort, and search team can complete the remainder in 2 further sprints, right? So search team has a small amount of work. Platform team roadmap for the remainder of the quarter, which is 6 sprints, is presently feature XYZ for the search team, estimated at 2 sprints, and then feature X for the compliance project, estimated by 4 sprints required by end of quarter. And the consequence of missing feature X is a legal exposure of $50,000 a day in compliance fines. Now, the detail here doesn't matter, right? The detail here is basically, well, it matters if this is real, it matters, right? But what I'm doing here is I'm illustrating that we're writing down the things that I think are really important for this. Now, if I'm going through this process and I'm debating with my checkout team and my search team and my platform team and my management, we may discover that some of this information is not relevant and we're missing other information here. For example, we might discover that that search team is currently under a great deal of pressure and has significant attrition risk due to burnout, right? Maybe that's something that's going on here that I discovered from the search team. We need to put this in here because management needs to take that into account, right? So I put that in there, right? We might do that in a discussion with the search team lead because that's what they believe, right? So now recommended solution is to continue delivering the search team feature. And by the way, this might be written by the platform team. It might be written by the search team. It might be written by the checkout team. In a sense, it doesn't matter. Probably I'd have the platform team write this. But maybe the search or checkout team is just more motivated and they want to write it, it's fine. Recommended solution here, I've written down, continue delivering the search team feature even though it's of lower value because there is no way for platform team to support checkout team and still meet the compliance deadline, and we believe the legal exposure is critical. So this makes my thinking, my thought process clear. And on top of this, we need to engage the legal and sales account management team to work with partners X, Y, and Z to manage expectations and mitigate impact of the missed checkout deadline. Did I get that right? Maybe I've confused this. I've confused it. I've mixed it up a bit, right? So, No, so we don't need to do that there. So that's actually not related. Whoops. Let's remove that then. So we're not going to do that. We're going to take that out of there because that's not relevant, right? Because if we're delaying a checkout team, if I got that right, checkout team does not have that limit. Its search team has that limit. Okay, cool. So that's the recommended solution, is continue delivering the search team feature. Options are platform team delivers the search feature and then compliance project on time, pushing checkout feature to next quarter, or platform team delivers checkout feature, then compliance project 1 sprint late, pushing search feature into next quarter. So basically we're trading off between search and checkout. And we say under the options here, we did not consider delaying the compliance project further and completing both sales and checkout features before the compliance feature, nor did we consider running the projects in parallel. They may be good options, but we haven't considered them. And the reason I'm writing it there is because in some ways they're an obvious thing to bring up, and maybe we need to dig into them, and maybe that's something that will come up. So perhaps we need to explain why. But for the purpose of this document, I decided not to cover them. Now we have pros and cons. So first of all, if the platform team delivers the search feature first, then what happens? Pro is that search and compliance for projects are unaffected, and platform team requires no change to current quarter planning. Cons, checkout feature is delayed by a whole quarter. This will cause us to miss delivering the feature for the conference, which may have a larger than anticipated effect and could miss a positive PR opportunity. Now, in this case here, this is the kind of thing where you're trying to work with the checkout team and understand what's the risk here, what's the pain point, make sure we're representing it clearly. Checkout team needs to move to other projects in the backlog to fill the quarter, mostly bug fixes and UI tuning, and this may require rework following the implementation of new payment methods. We think that the payment methods is like a critical path feature, right? And this requires, no, it doesn't. So we'll remove that because I've got that the wrong way around. There's a risk to customer retention or relationships from missing checkout commitments. Oh, what have I done here? I've got this the wrong way around. So those two are not supposed to be there. So we'll remove those two, right? Those are the wrong ones. Resources, no extra required, right? We've got existing resources, it's fine. Assumptions, assuming the compliance project risk is higher than the potential benefits of the checkout feature, we should do it in this order. Right, so if we think that the compliance project risk is high, we should definitely do it like this. The second one is the platform team delivers the checkout feature, then the compliance project, which will be 1 sprint late, and push the search project feature to the next quarter. The cons are the pros are that checkout team requires no change to current quarter planning, and will meet delivery of new payment methods in time for the conference with positive PR and significant incremental revenue estimated at X euro. So this is all of the pros, right? Search feature is delayed by a whole quarter. Search team has to work on other features in the meantime and has nothing promising in the delivery backlog. And what did I say about the search team up here? Did I say search team is under a great deal of pressure? So maybe that's a pro. Search team may have less pressure and could recover from burnout. But the problem here is that search team may have increased pressure in next quarter as they deliver the late feature, right? And we open ourselves to risk for non-compliance for 1 sprint, right? So these are the things, and there's the resources we need here are, in this case here, we'd have to have this is the part where we need to have the effort from legal and sales team, right? And we have effort from legal and sales team to renegotiate customer expectations and risk to customer retention or relationships from missing search commitments. And the resources include legal and sales account management support, right? And the assumption here is that assuming the benefit of the checkout feature, particularly the PR upside, is greater than the risk of the compliance feature, particularly the potential PR downside, we should do this. So this indicates that because we're trading off between PR risk, we really need to involve marketing, sales, and PR in this, possibly legal, right? So okay, that's really interesting. Now we've got this whole document here. So this document was 3 pages, I think, and I've got a couple of, or 4 pages, 4 pages long, but I have quite a few line breaks, and it's quite a spread out document, page breaks rather. And you can see here, clearly I've got too much background information. But then again, maybe that's because I have 3 teams there. So there's a page of background information. But you can see with this, that with that document, you can then have a conversation. Now, I'm not saying this document is perfect by any means. I know you saw me editing this as I went through because it just didn't quite make sense. That's fine. The purpose of this is to structure the conversation to make sure that people who read this can understand here are the basic problems that are going on here, and give them an opportunity to put in the things that they think are relevant and take out the things that they think are not relevant, and make sure that the decision-making process is clearer. So use this document as a straw man, not as I've perfected this document, now you don't touch it, make a decision, please. It's more a matter of like, here is the basis for my discussion. And what happens when you do this, if you write this document reasonably well, then you have a good discussion, and your discussion may include, you're missing this, this, and this background information. Here's a con we're missing, that pro doesn't really matter, whatever it is, but at least you're having a discussion about the material here. Whereas if you just have a conversation, it's very, very easy to get lost. So you focus the conversation on improving the document and on making sure that this document includes the right information for making decisions, right? And as I say, you may need to involve PR, sales, account management, whoever it is in this discussion, as well as senior managers, in order to create a decision. But if that's the case, it's probably a good thing that you're doing so, right? This is the goal of this, is to not to have a perfected document that a decision gets made, or that I write this document and now I make a decision and everyone agrees with my decision. The goal is to make sure that we're engaged at the right level, having the right conversations, bringing the right information in, including the right context, and the right people are making the decisions using the right principles. And we're trying to use this document to facilitate that approach. And if you do this as a manager, as a product manager, as a junior, as a mid-level manager, wherever you are in the organization, the thing that you're doing here is you're contributing to making sure that that conversation is happening and is happening well, and a good decision is being made. Okay, so that's the purpose of this process. In doing so, you're also learning and providing a coaching opportunity for yourself, providing the opportunity for your managers to understand more about what's going on in your world and your area, and helping them coach you and helping them teach you what's happening, so that in future, number one, you can be delegated more decision-making capability to your level, right? And number two, when there's an opportunity for advancement, you have someone who's demonstrated your decision-making prowess and how you go about making decisions, and people are willing to trust you with more responsibility. So not only does this help delegate more control down the organization, have more autonomous teams, it's a great career move. If this is something that you want to be, you want to get to the next level in your career, if you can demonstrate how you go about solving these stalemate issues, and you're good at writing these documents, you're good at helping people come to decisions that people are happy with, it's good. Last thing I will say about this is that by writing it down, by having this, making certain that you have represented accurately the other person's points of view, they then feel represented. They feel like, okay, well, a decision's been made, it didn't go the way I wanted, people disagree with me, but at least they understand, and they understand where I'm coming from. They understand why I disagree. And that makes it much easier for people to disagree and commit. Like, I disagree that we're making the right decision here because I think there's a bigger risk to the economy and therefore we should do this. But corporately, people have taken that information, management has taken this information, my managers, I've represented everything I can, they've looked at this and they've made a different decision because maybe they have different beliefs, maybe they have some other information. Hopefully they can educate me and help me understand that. But even if I still disagree, at least I feel like this decision has been well considered, and I'm not being steamrolled. I'm not being walked over by someone who has a more forceful personality, which often happens. And we're not sort of stuck in limbo where we're continuing to debate the same decision. So what happens when you write this down and you have this kind of discussion is you get a decision, and usually people stick to that decision and they continue on down that path. So hopefully you found this useful. I'd love to hear any comments, any feedback on this. Feel free to send me a direct message, an email, richard@russelland.company. Actually, maybe use richard@richardrussell.co. That's probably an easier email address to talk about. But drop me an email or drop a comment on LinkedIn or YouTube. I will respond to them. I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on this. Things that you think are good about this, or things that you think are not going to work, or questions that you have, any improvements you have. And one thing I'd caution with improvements is not to make it too big and complex, because you can easily turn this into a serious essay. I mean, the one that I wrote there, I'm making stuff up as I go along, so I don't always know what's happening, so I'm making up the scenario. But it took me 40 minutes to write. So if I knew the situation well enough, it would probably take me about an hour to write, and then some time to just align with people. And that's good, because an hour of work and a couple of pages is good, because then I've done an hour of work to sort of sort this out. I can have a really efficient conversation, get to a decision, maybe escalate where I need to, get to a decision, learn some stuff, and move on. And that's a really good investment of time. If you invest like 3 days in writing this document, you're going to be emotionally invested in it. and it's going to be polished and it's going to be really big and complex and people can't consume it. So when you're thinking about how to improve this or how to use this, always keep it as the simplest way you can do it that's going to get to the result. So as a quick reminder, write the problem down, including any pertinent background or contextual information. Filtering that is really important to make sure it's efficient. You're writing it not to have a complete all the information, but to make sure that people see the most important stuff and understand the most important things. And usually, by the way, something overrides most other things. So that's something that's the most important, and you've got to figure out what that is and relegate the rest of it to the background. What your recommended solution and your reasons and your thought processes, any principles you've applied. List out all the options you've considered, and then go through each option and say what's good about this, what's bad about this, what the resource requirements for doing this is if we want to do it, and any conditions, specifically any conditions where this may be preferred. So you can actually write also, by the way, the reasoning for this one, but that's kind of like the conditions. So if we think that this is going to be higher, the economy is going upwards, then we should do this one, right? So problem, solution, all the options, the argument about each option, including the conditions where they preferred and the resource requirements, and then go and review this with number one, your colleagues, and number two, after that, your management, and see if we can get a decision. Okay, thanks very much. I hope this is useful for you. Have a great day.